Welcome to ThePPod.
Okay, welcome to ThePPod, the partnership podcast from the Somerset Safeguarding Children Partnership. My name's Steve Maccabee and I'm the multi-agency training manager for the SSCP. Now, in today's episode, we're going to be discussing the issue of parental conflict and the short and long-term impact that this can have on children. Now, back in 2018, the government launched the Reducing Parental Conflict programme to address interparental conflict into family services, which included interventions for families experiencing conflict, as well as training for practitioners to be able to identify and support families where this was taking place. Now, to support the programme in Somerset in 2022, Reducing Parental Conflict CoOrdinator post was created to drive the initiative forward. And I'm pleased to welcome in the studio today Ruth James, the Reducing Parental Conflict CoOrdinator for Somerset, to talk to us about what we actually mean when we talk about parental conflict and how families can be supported. So, Ruth, welcome to ThePPod.
Hello, thank you. Lovely to be here.
It's great to have you here. Thanks for joining us. And I'm really kind of interested today to talk about this topic. And I think it's a topic that often when you talk to people about reducing parental conflict, you sort of get a bit of a look sort of saying, I'm not quite sure what you're actually talking about here.
No, and I think this project's a very exciting opportunity to actually help parents and support them. I mean, this is a DWP funded project, and they are very much focusing on conflicts that are frequent, intense, and poorly resolved. And I think that captures what we're trying to do quite well. Basically, it's that ongoing, unresolved arguments in families that just cause a great deal of stress, great deal of tension within the family, but it isn't domestic abuse.
Right.
This is all conflict up to domestic abuse. So unhealthy parental conflict is very much about having a balance of power. It's not about seeking to control each other, and it's not about being afraid of each other. It's very much about you just stuck in this very unhealthy cycle of not being able to move up, bringing up the past, frequently regret being in the relationship, and it just becomes exhausting and it grinds people down. And it's the impact it has on the children. This whole project is about improving outcomes for children. And I think that's why I just think it's so worthwhile, because children really struggle. I mean, it's estimated that 13% of children live in families struggling with unhealthy conflict. And there's just all sorts of sort of psychological and physical impacts. There's increased anxiety and depression. There's lower school attainment. There's also issues around how they're able to form longer term relationships. So there are short term as well as long term impacts for this, and which is why I really firmly believe in what we're trying to do.
It's interesting you picked up straight away there around domestic abuse, and I think domestic abuse is rightly something that there's been a very, very strong focus on over the years. There's broadly a good understanding about actually the real negative impact that can have on children. We've got things like the Domestic Abuse Act that was brought in 2021. But when we talk about that sort of that lower level, like say, conflict between parents within the household, quite often there isn't that kind of recognition of the impact that can have, like you say. And so you said this was originally funded by the DWP, Department for Work and Pensions. Why did they sort of pick this up? And why were they kind of looking at this as an issue?
They recognised and did an awful lot of research around the impact of children living in that ongoing intense conflict, and determined that actually the children who lived in that situation had poorer outcomes. I mean, it's not rocket science in so many ways. You know, when your parents argue, you remember how that made you feel. So just imagine how children feel who live in those really kind of that ongoing conflict within the household, the constant levels of stress, the tension. And the problem is the parents are so overwhelmed by this conflict, they're unable to properly parent their children. I mean, we all know what it's like when we've been in relationships and had arguments. It's horrible. And so actually this is so worthwhile. I mean, yes, the DWP spent an awful lot of time and energy doing the research. But again, it's children who live in families where there are lots of intense arguments have poorer outcomes across a whole range of things. So actually this very much focuses on actually reducing conflict. It focuses on actually improving communication, but particularly it's improving co-parenting. Because for this project, this really is not about the quality. This is about the quality of the relationship, not the structure. So it doesn't matter whether the parents are living together, whether they're apart, whether they're non-biological parents, whether they're foster parents, it doesn't matter. This relates to any parent where there's a co-parenting relationship with the child. We now have some free support available to help those parents just work through things. And it's really interesting. A lot of the stuff that I'm becoming quite a fan of is stuff from America. Because in this country, I think when it comes to relationships, we're quite passive. Mm-hmm. We just sort of slide into relationships. We get into relationships. We want to have that intimate relationship with somebody else. But there's very little about actually how relationship education in terms of how to have a good relationship, what that means, about understanding each other. And I've come across some brilliant stuff that I think everybody needs to know. And it's not just about having that intimate relationship. It's about all relationships. I think we can all learn all sorts of things. I wish I'd known some of this stuff sort of years ago when I got married. And I think it's all about actually the more we can learn about each other, the more we can understand ourselves and our partner, the better our relationship is. And the better the relationship is, the lower the stress and the happier the children. Whether together or apart, whatever structure that is. But that's what this is about. It's actually about enabling children to have just calmer, more settled family lives so they can then thrive and become their very best in their own way.
It's interesting you talk there about sort of relationship education. And I think certainly sort of looking back on my education when I was a child, like you say, I think there was a severe lack of that. I think there was a biology lesson which talked about the biology of sex, which was, I think, showed an animation that made everybody laugh, and that was about it. But I know sort of more recently there's been a big focus on relationship, sex and health education for schools, and that's sort of coming in with the sexual abuse and harassment in schools sort of Ofsted review and things. So I'm hoping that that's something that over time with sort of the generation coming through now will be sort of changing, because I think you're right, there needs to be much greater emphasis on actually on relationships, on how do we resolve sort of conflict, because there is conflict in life. There is always conflict in life, and actually how we can address those conflicts without sort of really sort of clashing and arguing all the time, and how we can sort of have a mature way of sort of processing that and working through that in partnership.
And I think the key thing is about understanding ourselves and understanding other people, because we are wired to connect with other people. We are wired. One of our key drives is reproduction. We are wired. We constantly want that safe place. We want that safe relationship. We want emotional safety. That's what our brains crave. However, we're in this world to survive. And so we are constantly on the lookout for threats. And I think in this day and age, it's particularly threats to our identity. And so actually, because we're also wired to survive, we have an automatic negative bias. So we're more likely to pick up the negative than the positive. And so there is a lot around relationship education, but I also think there's an awful lot we need to know how to build a stronger relationship, how to get on the front foot, how to invest in that relationship in a positive way, how to build our partner up and not just lower the conflict. I personally think it's a combination of the two. I mean, I met a couple the other day and they just sniped and argued and it was all really negative. And I said to them, I said, when was the last thing you ever said anything positive? And they just looked at me blank as if to say, didn't occur to me. And I think that's where this comes from. It comes from a place of actually the more you understand about how to have a good relationship, how to make conscious decisions, not just slide into relationships, but actually how to make intentional decisions about a relationship, and how to actually build the other person up. Because surely in that loving, intimate relationship, you want your partner to be the best they can be. So it's how do I enable that? But very often we're quite selfish in relationships. It's what I want. You're not solving my problems. So actually you're not doing this. And I think particularly with parents, been there, done that. I've got 3 children, so I know what it's like to have 3 little ones. And often you niggle and moan about, well, you're not doing this and you're not doing that. And actually what we should be doing is say, well, I really appreciate you doing that. It might not be the way I would do it, but there are ways of kind of sometimes just to thank you. Mm-hmm. That's all it takes to kind of shift the atmosphere. Because as parents, we set the atmosphere in the home. We set the emotional atmosphere. So actually, if we're constantly niggling at each other, are we setting the right atmosphere? Probably not.
I just wondering, could you sort of talk to us about what some of the sort of key factors that contribute to parental conflict and how do these kind of impact on children? What, do you kind of see sort of common themes coming up?
I mean, very often it's triggered by things like, tiredness and exhaustion. It might be triggered by money. Money is quite a big one, obviously. And I think particularly at the moment, that whole stress around money. I think different values can actually be friends, social media. Parenting is can be a big trigger. Two parents having very different styles of parenting. So one might be quite lax, the other one might be too strict. So I think styles of parenting actually is probably one of the top issues around this, on top of money. And then somebody might lose a job, and it might be, and so you've got different expectations. I would say expectations are probably some of the highest areas as well, in terms of if you are working part-time and your partner is working full-time, the expectation from the full-time parent might be you keep an orderly house. And it's not like that in practice. So I think expectations is probably a big trigger as well.
Mm. Do you see many families, and you mentioned about parental mental health there.
Yeah.
Do you see many sort of families that you come into contact with where there may be sort of drug and alcohol difficulties as well, sort of some of the contributing factors, or do you not tend to see that so much? Does that tend to sort of be more sort of around domestic abuse?
I would say it's quite a big trigger. I mean, you only know from friends, talking to friends, have a few drinks, the arguments start. So I would say mental health is a big contributor to conflict, full stop, because actually when you're feeling miserable and you're feeling really down, you're far more likely to see the negative, and you're far more likely to bite and be defensive. And I think a lot of people don't understand behind conflict, it's all about fear. It's all about fear of rejection. It's all about fear of you having a go at me. It's about fear about you leaving. And we often undermine ourselves. And I think the other key thing as well is actually we need to learn to let go. I think something happens and you feel hurt and it keeps coming up and up again. And I think the ability to move on is really key. And I want to do some specific work around that eventually, around helping people move on, and actually don't keep bringing up the past, and don't keep bringing up that argument 2 years ago that actually doesn't need to be said. So no, I think mental health has got a big factor in this, and particularly since COVID, and sort of kind of the legacy of that, particularly mental health around the children, but as well as the parents, because I think parents can feel quite lonely and quite isolated increasingly, and I think that is really tough. So inevitably then you end up picking at each other because you feel miserable. I've done it. I've done it.
Yeah, and I think there's a real risk, isn't there, of sort of people developing negative coping strategies of, actually, I'm not happy in this relationship. I'm feeling depressed. I'm feeling down. I'm feeling isolated. Actually, I'm going to have a drink. And then you see those kind of negative sort of spirals going on forward from that.
And the problem is we get into bad habits. The problem is our brains like to be as efficient as possible. And without we knowing it, we actually get into bad relationship habits. So we end up, and the typical one is a voice. The typical one is tone of voice. Now, tone of voice for me is really important because tone of voice conveys all your emotions in one package. And unfortunately, many couples get a tone of voice with their partner and they use it and it triggers them. And I think that's why it's really, really important to sort of just take a step back and reflect and try and see things from somebody else's perspective, because you get so caught up in the moment and the busyness and the issues and the challenges that actually you don't see what's going on in your partner's life because it's all about me, because it's all about me.
And do you see many families who may talk about their own experiences of being parented when they were a child and sort of how that's impacted? Because I think there has been quite a fundamental shift in my view that in terms of sort of parenting going back, my generations, my parents' generations, and so on and so forth, and very sort of different parenting styles coming up. And I know, sort of reflecting on my own sort of childhood, which was very positive, but there was kind of, for my parents, very much when they were children are seen but not heard. They're sort of in the background. And certainly not sort of talking about emotions, feelings, and things like that. And I could see that change in my parents, who were sort of very open to sort of talking about these things. But I think moving forward, you see that more and more. And certainly a lot of friends of mine who are parents now are, really kind of keen to talk about emotions and feelings and things like that. But I'm conscious as well that many parents now who may have had negative parenting experiences themselves as a child haven't sort of learned those coping strategies, those communication strategies. Do you see that much?
Very much so. No, very much so. And I think that is one of the key areas. I think a couple of things there, actually. And I think the problem is we tend to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I think when we look back at sort of like my parents and how I was parented and how I have parented, I think sometimes it's about taking the good and leaving the rest. And the danger is that we can leave all of it because we dismissed it. And I think around managing emotions, one of the most powerful things I've come across is emotion coaching. It was a revelation because as a mum, I was always a problem solver.
Okay.
And if anybody knows about emotion coaching, it's about sort of acknowledging your partner or your child's emotions, and it's just listening to them. It's empathizing and just being there in that moment, just being with them. And then actually when they're ready to move on and then encouraging them to problem solve, not you telling them what to do. And I think in relationship, that's so true. But I think around parenting nowadays, there is so much conflict because of that, because a lot of parents are told, why aren't they doing what they're told? And the other one is, well, yeah, let's just sort of, they're obviously upset and let them, and actually they get away with murder. And it's that extreme. Whereas actually you are aiming for the firm but fair. Because I think one of the gaps around, I'm a big fan of helping children manage their emotions, but actually to help children manage their emotions, and this is one of the big missings, I think, with some parents, is that actually they need boundaries. Because the security is within those boundaries. They actually need those firm boundaries, loving boundaries, not unreasonable boundaries, but they need them because that is how they feel secure. And in terms of, if you look at all the research around parenting, children need firm boundaries to help them themselves regulate their emotions. So it's not about being cruel. It's not about anything else. And I think linked to that very much is the consistency. I came across a lovely term called the nagging index.
Right.
And because consistency, our brains crave consistency. They like to predict what's going to happen. So if 1 minute the mum says no, and then the next minute they say yes, it confuses children. Children like consistency. And so actually, if a child nags for something and nags for a very long time and the parents eventually give in, that then tells the child, if I nag, I give in. Whereas actually what they're actually craving is actually, no, I want mum, I need you to stick to that boundary. I need you to follow through. And if I can't have this, I need you to do that because that gives me consistency, but it gives me security. You're showing me that you love me. And I had a really good analogy at the weekend, actually. It was like, somebody said, actually, it's like football. Because if you played the World Cup final and there were no rules, all hell would break loose. Whereas actually there are rules. So there is a structured game and there is a winner and a loser. And actually it's no different in family life. And it's about loving and fair. And it's about working with the children. But actually, and I think this is the issue now, is that because there's a lot of confusion around parenting. I talked to a mum yesterday and she's reading all the books or she's looking on the websites and she said it's a bit overwhelming. And I thought we just need to pin it down to the simple, because it's very much about doing the simple well, but it's sticking to your boundaries. It's being consistent. And actually, if you can parent together, have those conversations away from the children, agree what your approach is, agree on consequences, agree on rewards, and then implement that together as a couple, you will have a much calmer family life. The problem is you've got to invest to save. And it's like the mum I was talking to yesterday, she's got a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old. And she really wants to do the right thing, but it's hard work. It's really, really hard work. But if you can do that, boy, is your life easier. And that's what parents don't see.
Yeah, and like you say, if you've got parents with different value bases, different parenting styles, you can see then, again, you get that lack of consistency, but then also you get the conflict between the parents that actually, within their minds, they are doing it correctly and their partner isn't. So then you get the conflict between that.
Massively. And I think that's a very common theme. And the problem is then the children get away with the behaviour and it's the behaviour that triggers the conflict. And so actually my top tip would be for parents to really get together, decide together, because I think the other thing is each couple and each family is unique. What's right for them might not be right for other people, but it's right for them. But they've got to decide that proactively, be intentional about actually what is right for our family. And actually, if you want a calmer, happier family life, actually it involves some of this quite hard work. And I think the other thing is anything can change. It's never, ever too late. Even if your teenager is out of control and it's causing no end of parental conflict, you can still change that around. I have no doubt at all. And I think it's just learning some of those key skills and just sticking with it. Because any child wants security. Any child wants their parents to get on. at the core of it, ask any child, they want their parents to get on, be that together or apart, not fussed about the structure. It's all about they want their parents to get on, because actually that is so much better for their mental health, well-being, and actually their ability to become the best person they can be.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And just so we sort of talked about the topic there. I'm just wondering if we can sort of talk about specifically your role in Somerset. So you've been in post now, where are we, about year and a half?
8 months.
8 months,
8 months.
So, yeah, can you tell us about your role in Somerset?
Yes, I certainly can. No, I started December 2022, and there are 2 key areas that I'm working on. The first one is working out for Somerset what we need to support parents struggling with conflict. So that's been working out, talking to people who were involved in there was a previous iteration of this, and there was quite a lot of learning. So I've worked with those colleagues and worked out actually what we can put in place for parents in Somerset to help them reduce conflict. And I think this next 12 months we used a lot of common sense. We copy a lot from what other local authorities do. I've got some brilliant colleagues around the Southwest, which have been really helpful. And we've put in place what we think is sensible at the moment. So, for example, I am a big fan of 1+1 parenting. Those are 3 online courses we've bought the license for 12 months. And there are 3 courses. One is called Me, You and Baby 2, which is all for parents who have got new babies. It goes through managing change, managing conflict, communicating, kind of managing the tiredness and the stress of having a baby. And I think sometimes they're only about sort of 30, 40 minutes to do, but the videos are brilliant. And it just really helps parents just take a breath, pause, just think again. So we've got Me, You and Baby 2. We've also got Arguing Better.
Okay.
Now, a lot of arguments we've already mentioned are caused by stress. Life happens, and we've still got family life. And so there's a lot in Arguing Better around managing stress, but also better ways of arguing and managing conflict, because the ability to manage conflict well really strengthens any relationship. Having no conflict isn't normal. So I think conflict's on a spectrum, and actually learning how to manage conflict well can really strengthen any relationship. So healthy conflict is good. Not unhealthy conflict. So Arguing Better gives you some of those skills. And then a lot of conflict happens around when parents are separating or are separated. So there is a specific course called Getting It Right for Children. And that's very much to support parents who are separated, because actually it is about co-parenting. And that course has got a number of lovely little videos, very short videos, just illustrating the impact it has on children when you get it wrong, and actually how to pause and how to just reframe conversations, and how not to kind of get stuck in this habit of sort of, what does she want now? It's actually just pausing for the sake of the children. It's not about you in that case, it's about the children. And actually it's those handover moments, and actually it's the planning, it's the money, it's that sort of how that works in practice, but actually how to do that better. So we've got that in place. The other thing we have bought, and which is free at the moment for any parent in Somerset, is that we've got relationship counselling with Relate. And this is very much for parents who are just struggling with their relationship. It's not about money. It's not about it's all about their issues in their relationship. And this is up to a kind of 6-week free counselling with Relate, which is quite an amazing opportunity. And so parents can apply for that free online. All the information is on the website that I'll talk about in a little bit, or just to contact me and I'll send them the details. The other thing linked to that as well is something called Co-Parenting Every Day, and that's similar to relationship counselling. Again, it's just with the counsellor and the parents, and it's about actually how to co-parent. So this is specifically for separating or separated parents, but they do need to go along together. And if there is irreconcilable differences, the Ministry of Justice do provide £500 mediation vouchers. So actually, if parents have just decided, actually, no, we can't stay together, we can't talk about this, they can get some free mediation vouchers through the Ministry of Justice. And we are hoping to do more things. I'm hoping to run some face-to-face courses and do more things as time goes on.
I think that's really key what you've been talking about there in terms of we need to recognise conflict within relationships. But like you say, sometimes they don't work out. Sometimes relationships don't work out. But I think I've seen in my sort of career so many times where the children are sort of forgotten, certainly when parents split. And I've seen it so many times where parents are saying, oh, well, they haven't paid their maintenance, so I'm going to stop the kids from seeing them this weekend. Or they've sent me loads of text messages, so I'm going to stop the kids having contact with them for now. But actually, that's using the children, in that situation, which is really damaging and unfair on them. And like I say, actually, where's the child's wishes and feelings within this?
And I think that's why I love some of the stuff we've got, because actually it highlights that, but in a very gentle way, because parents have got enough guilt. This is not about guilting, and this is about you as an individual and how we can support you so you feel better about it. Because it's horrible having that constant stress and that constant strain on you as an individual. So this isn't only about helping your partner. This is about helping you, actually, because if you are kinder or don't say what you want to say, actually there's a better outcome, and surely then, because the children benefit from that. And so this is actually about you learning those skills, because you'll feel better about the whole thing. You will, because you'll see your children are happier. So it very much is about, we're doing this for the children, but also for you, because living in that constant stress of this intense ongoing argument is just miserable for everybody concerned. But I do realise life is not simple. It isn't straightforward. So we do try and sort of point to simple things, because you're not going to solve it all. This isn't about solving relationship problems. This is about reducing conflict in a very straightforward way. So that's why I'm quite a fan of the stuff we've put in place. And also the other thing on the website, there's a lot of signposts to other organisations that can help single parents or help people in specific situations.
And I'm just wondering, you mentioned the 1+1 resources just a moment ago. Who can access those? Who's able to use those?
Any parent in Somerset. Anybody. It's free to any parent in Somerset. All you need is a Somerset postcode and an email address. And you can dip in and out. You can just go through them. You can just choose some of the videos. But I really am a fan. Once you get to them, they are brilliant, actually. They really do help see things from a different perspective. They're really simple. I'm quite a fan.
No, it's great. And it's great when you're passionate about something, isn't it? But I'm just wondering, in terms of the work you do, I know, presume that you do a lot of work linking in with partners, sort of raising awareness, but also helping for them to be able to support families. Would you be able to talk about some of the agencies that you work with?
No, absolutely. I mean, that's the other big chunk of my job. The majority of the work I do at the moment is working with partners. So the work I've got is available to anybody who works with parents, be that NHS, council, voluntary, SCAT, anybody at all who works with parents can access the stuff I've got. And I've put together a Somerset toolkit to support practitioners in working with parents. And I've tried to keep that really simple, but actually some of those tools, because having conversations, what the dream of the DWP is for anybody working with parents to have a conversation about how's it going, how's your relationship going? And what the toolkit does is enable some of that. So I've got some lovely simple tools, like I've got an arrow on a piece of paper. So where is your relationship? Is it near? Is it good? Is it not good? So whereabouts on that arrow are you? Does it fluctuate? Where does it go? And actually, so what's going on? So what's going well? But actually, what are you struggling with? And I've got other tools like a typical day, where you sort of unpick morning, afternoon, evening. What happens when are the conflicts triggered? Typical example. So Monday morning, my 7-year-old can never find their shoes. I always have a go at my husband because actually it's his job to put the shoes out. So actually it's just realising that happens every Monday. So actually perhaps we'll put the shoes out on a Sunday night. Conflict goes away. So I think conflict, there are some really practical things that can bypass some of the conflict. And some of the tools just help parents unpick it. The other one is sometimes, often, never. And it's just things like bring up the past, say encouraging things. And it's just, again, when are we positive with each other? When do we encourage it? When do we feel we're appreciated by the other person? Or do we always shout at each other? Do we always do this? So there are some really simple tools in the toolkit. that was free for anybody to use to just enable some of those conversations. But I also offer any training. I am happy to go along to any team meeting. I'm happy to talk to individuals. I'm happy to talk through cases, because we are in the learning phase of this project. We need to make sure that what is left at the end of this project is actually fit for purpose, and everybody knows what it is and where it is. So there's a lot of work I need to do around raising the profile of the work, which this podcast is a brilliant start of that. So I'm happy to talk to anybody about how they can work with parents to reduce parental conflict, but not solve relationship problems. It's not solving problems, it's reducing conflict.
Yeah, thank you. And you've talked a lot about sort of families that you've worked with, even that sort of fairly short period of time. Have you got any success stories you'd be able to share with us at all?
It's still quite early days. I've only just moved to the Family Intervention Service. I've only just starting with parents, but I do have some quotes from parents who have done the 1+1 training from Somerset. And things like, we now like to give each other space when we can feel an argument escalating, and this has really helped both of us. Things like, seeing how it can make a child feel lets you see what happens in a disagreement and how much you can make a difference by making small changes. Other things like parents have said, being careful about what we say, staying calmer and negotiating, how to avoid arguments and communicate better. So this is just a sample of comments, and just a lovely one here is, we will give each other time to talk. We have built on our listening skills and will appreciate each other more. So it's not difficult, complicated stuff. It is the simple, it's pausing, it's stopping, it's just taking a step back. And I think this is the beauty of this work, is that it doesn't take a lot to make a big difference.
So small changes.
Small changes. Really, it's very much, I mean, how I like to promote this with practitioners is just one thing. If you can help that parent learn just one thing, to just pause and not say something or just take a step back in that moment, it opens the door to a better relationship.
So looking sort of longer term now, what are your hopes, your aspirations for the programme over the next kind of 12 months, 5 years more? You know, what would be your sort of long-term aspirations for this?
The dream would be for all practitioners who work with parents to actually automatically have conversations about relationships and know where to signpost parents if they're struggling, or know how to have conversations, to just find small things that can just de-escalate in that moment. I think the other thing is, so it's just common practice. It's part of the culture, and we value relationships. But I think the other side of it is actually, I think particularly that 0 to 5 is an automatic part of that sort of early years parenting, is actually parents are taught how to argue. Parents are taught how to be intentional about a relationship. And I think just embedding relationship education in how we think. And I think for Somerset, what I would really like to do is produce our own evidence-informed course that anybody can run, that's online, that people know how to access. But it's actually, we value relationships in Somerset. Relationships, particularly between parents, are really important to us, and we're here to support them, whatever structure that may be. But relationships are so important because we want our children to live in calm family lives and actually be the best children they can be, and sort of thrive in school and thrive at home.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ruth. So I'm just thinking to round things off, for anybody sort of listening to this and sort of keen to find out more, where can they find out information?
I've now got information on a website, and the address is www.cypsomersethealth, all one word, .org. And if you go to that website and you go into the Parent and Carer Toolkit, and then you go into Managing Relationship Conflict, there are two areas there. One, information for parents, and the other, information for practitioners. And there are loads of really good links there to all sorts of information, and particularly the link to the 1+1 parenting, which I would absolutely advocate. The other area, the other videos I really would recommend would be the See It Differently website. And there are some brilliant little videos practitioners can use with parents on that one as well.
Fantastic. Thank you. And for anybody listening to this, I will put the links to those sites in the description for this podcast. And also, Ruth, I know that we were talking just before recording this today, and sort of lots of plans moving forward. We're talking about looking at some webinars that we can put out here through the partnership, and maybe put together some short videos for people as well that we'll host through our YouTube channel. So yeah, keep your eyes peeled for that. We'll be sort of working on those over the next few months, and hopefully getting some more information out there for you. So Ruth, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. It's been really interesting sort of talking about this topic and sort of all the details of it. And it's great that we've got you in post to really drive the agenda forward. So Ruth, thank you so much. And thank you for your time today. And we'll look forward to speaking to you again at some point at the ThePPod.
Thank you. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thanks, Ruth. Take care.
Bye.
As always, if you'd like to find out more details on the topics discussed in today's episode, go to the SSCP website at somersetsafeguardingchildren.org.uk or by following any of the links in the description. If you have any questions or comments arising from today's episode, or would like to be involved in future episodes, we'd love you to get in touch with us at theppod@somerset.gov.uk. Once again, I'd like to thank Ruth James, Reducing Parental Conflict CoOrdinator, for taking part in today's podcast, and to you for listening. My name's Steve Maccabee, and I'm the Training Manager for the Somerset Safeguarding Children Partnership, and I look forward to you joining us again next time at the ThePPod.
Let's work together to help keep children safe.